Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym.
My guest on the Writer's Gym today is one of the most influential writers in my life, so it was even more of a pleasure than usual when what we all feel, I'm not a writer, so-and-so's a real writer, when Kim Morgan, founder of Barefoot Coaching and the author of the Coach's Casebook and my favourite column in Psychologies Magazine for many years, said that to me. I have never been so glad I founded the Writer's Gym because it allowed me to give back exactly what this is all for and what all writers needed. Kim is an internationally recognised expert in coaching and coach training, one of the select band of coaches accredited by the ICF as a master certified coach. She draws extensively on her own experience of what works in practice to make successful individuals, great leaders, productive teams and organisations, and outstanding coaches. Kim designed and launched the Barefoot Flagship Course in 2001. Her passion and curiosity ensure that the course is constantly evolving, refreshed by new ideas and thinking, and always remaining grounded in ethical and psychological rigour. Her passion to spread the word about coaching has resulted in 2 best-selling books, The Coach's Casebook in 2015 and The Coach's Survival Guide in 2019. Kim also has a monthly coaching column in Psychologies Magazine, and she's a sought-after conference speaker on all things coaching related. My absolute dream guest on a number of fronts. Kim, I discovered your writing through Psychologies Magazine long before I had any knowledge that I would get certified as a coach. I read those columns and began finding a language for how all of us show up in the world and that struggle between, essentially for me, I think that one of the most important messages was who we feel we're supposed to be versus who we're discovering we are. And you'd see these case studies every issue, not just of the client, but I think the most important message to me in the world, that it was just as much about what was going on for the coach as the human being they were, what was going on for the client. And it did something that I'm just going to have a bit of a fangirl moment on this, because it did something that I think is so deeply important for writers and human beings in general, to know that everybody comes with their own backstory and everybody is responding to other people based on a lot of factors, that we're not moving through the world neutral, that characterization is everything, really. And the more we understand ourselves, the more we can operate healthily and the more truly we connect. And I then went and found Barefoot Coaching during lockdown, and I had my lovely time just studying there. And through all of that, we hadn't met at that point. I think I'd sent you a couple of LinkedIn messages, but you are the voice of that business. So as a writer of 2 of my favourite coaching manuals, well, more than 2, but just a very quick shout out that can possibly be seen over my shoulder, the Coach's Survival Guide and the Coach's Casebook. I've learned so much from your writing and from how generously and articulately you make yourself part of that process, and you became the voice of that business and obviously of those books. So there's no day I'm working where you're not part of how I operate. And then you said something to me when we started talking that really made me realize how important and how true what I'm doing with the Writer's Gym is, which is that you, like everybody else I speak to, have experienced imposter syndrome around writing. And for me to hear the sort of the I'm not really a writer, somebody else is a real writer thing that is the chorus of all of us, but from you, who have influenced me through your writing so deeply for years, was actually in a way a wonderful thing to hear. But I guess when you hear somebody else saying it, it's a very different experience, isn't it? It feels real in ourselves, doesn't it?
It does. Wow. Rachel, even if you haven't stopped, I'm going to stop you now, because I'm just feeling overwhelmed with the level of celebration of me and my writing from you. Thank you. Thank you. I really mean that. I was sitting there listening to you, and I think our initial conversation about whether we would have this podcast or not, when I came on, was just adamant that I'm not a writer. Why have you asked me to come on it? And the conversation that ensued, and your challenge and your support and the evidence that you gave me, actually genuinely shifted something in me. It really did. And I've come on here today thinking, yeah, I am a writer. And you've said to me, have you written books? I said, yes. You said, well, you're a writer then. It was a straightforward question, but the most powerful one. So thank you for reading all that into my writing. That I feel very seen and very understood, because, those are exactly my beliefs about coaching and about writing, that we're all vulnerable, that we're all frail, that we're all coming, when you meet someone in a book or you meet somebody, the reader and the author, each bringing their own kind of limiting beliefs and worldview to that. And there's some sort of magical alchemy that happens, I think, when those two things connect. And it's exactly the same with coaching. I have to say that I was very inspired to write in that way by showing the vulnerability of the coach along with the story of someone else. And there were a few things that led me to that. One was reading Irvin Yalom's book called Love's Executioner and Other Tales. I don't know if you've read that, but it's really
I'm actually writing it down as we speak.
Okay. I think you will recognize how much I learned from his writing style. He's a psychotherapist, and he was brutally honest behind the scenes as he went back to his desk about his frustrations with some of the clients that he'd seen that day, about, in some cases, his kind of judgments about them. But in the moments in the room, he'd contained that, and he dealt with it outside in supervision, but he acknowledged it at the same time. And that, I thought, gosh, that resonated with the way that I work. Having a whole range of emotions from love to kind of sheer outrage and annoyance that are never conveyed to them. So I thought I want to write like that. And then it was my experience of having not only read self-help books, but worked with them, recommended them to people, and come to the conclusion, really, that just telling people how to do things doesn't make them change. But writing about how other people in similar situations to the situations they may be in is a whole different approach to encouraging people to think about their behaviours, their limiting beliefs, and maybe how they could do something about them when they're reading about somebody else in that same situation. So I think those, Irvin Yalom, I have to say, led the way in this kind of therapist self-disclosure. And I followed with a not quite such a stark honesty, but I think I'm pretty honest about what's going on for me in the coaching sessions. And then just that belief that self-help books really are breaking all the rules of coaching, because they're just telling, do this and you'll feel better. And that's not the place I come from.
And the place you come from is very discursive, isn't it? And I think just hearing you say that, it does remind me of why fiction writing also is so important, that we understand that we are identifying with somebody who doesn't technically exist, but the idea that under the literal truth, the emotional truth is truer, that when, for example, you fictionalize a case study in order to not bring the individual or individuals' specifics into it, but you go for what is the essential truth underneath that not only helps one person but helps countless. So I guess I'm interested, I don't know if there is, but is there a link between I'm not a real writer or somebody else is a real writer and the kinds of writing that we do? I mean, is it that thing where we look at somebody doing another genre, like what is technically labelled as fiction rather than fictionalised memoir, and go, that's a writer? Is it any of that, or is it just comparing ourselves with the giants whose shoulders we feel we're standing on?
That's a really, really insightful question, Rachel. And I had never thought it But as you say, something in it has really rung true with me. I think a novel, probably a work of complete fiction, would maybe, I won't know until I do it, but maybe say, yes, you are now a writer. Capital A, capital W.
I enjoyed that until. Can I keep that until?
Yes, there was an until, wasn't there? No, there wasn't any. Yeah.
I'm just putting it there where it's safe. It's just going to sit there. That's me patting its head off camera. It's just.
Yeah, we could even give it a date, couldn't we? We could even say.
Oh, Kim, I am such a fan of deadlines. I love eat, sleep and breathe deadlines because a big thing in the writer's gym is, I think I've mentioned to you in the past, is the say the thing or the vomit draft, that getting something imperfect into the world that you can then work on. I find deadlines so directly related to that because it reminds me it's never about doing it perfect, because perfect was never on the menu. I know, because it says so on my bookmarks, but it's getting something into the world that you can then improve. And it's really nice for me hearing this, because one of the things that I hear come up for people quite a bit is we can kind of, as much as we are taking that permission, that wonderful permission of, I see how he's doing that, I see how that works for me, I'm going to do some of that. It is the inspiration, but it can also be a rejection of permission at the same time, where you go, oh, but, he's already done it like that, or who am I to do it like this? And, I hear a lot of people saying, am I cheating, or am I allowed to do that? This is where we bring in this whole thing about, another thing on my Writer's Gym bookmark is that there may be 7 basic plots, but there are infinite original voices, that you can't be Shakespeare, but you also can't be the other person at the bus stop who might write a different thing to you when you're both beginners. We've all got something unique.
And actually, I think if for people who are thinking about writing, I'm now saying, from the position of being a writer, I'm now dispensing wisdom, thanks to you. But for people who are thinking about writing, I think surely the first starting point is, like, whose writing do you like? Who inspires you? Who do you aspire to? Reading that book was like, yes, I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting to read somebody who isn't pompous and all-knowing and has got it all sorted. I've been waiting for someone to say, I went home and I was like, yeah, that just drives me mad. And it's not, of course, that all our clients drive us mad. It's just the bringing our own complex feelings into the wonderful human work that we do. And it was just like a permission for me. By the way, his wife also writes beautifully. I think her name's Marilyn. I think you would love both of their writing. I'm talking like I know them.
It does feel like that though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, because I only met you very recently, but there is the part of me that feels that familiarity, because when somebody puts an authentic, I don't mean description in the technical sense, but description of what they believe in and what they are doing in the world, it not only makes the writing fuller, richer, more itself, but that sense of connection goes both ways, that the reader and the writer experience that. And and I do have to say thank you again, because I know that's something I wouldn't necessarily have known how to let myself just do before I discovered the vocabulary of coaching, that I would have been standing in my own way going, who am I to talk to Kim Morgan, who founded, Barefoot Coaching? Whereas now I'm going, we're all this great big tapestry or spider web really of, connections to everybody else. We can all be of service. We can all be part of each other's growth and development. And I think this is why I think coaching was just the best thing that happened to me, not just professionally, but personally, because it is that thing that you realise, what if everybody else is just as nervous about everything as I could ever be? And then, I don't know about you, but I look back through my life and the people that didn't give me that messaging were usually not the happiest with what was going on for them.
No.
And this is something better.
It's a kind of universal truth, isn't it? I have rarely met anyone who's completely happy with every aspect of themselves and their lives. And I think that's what coaching does more than anything. The joy I get from all the people we've trained as coaches is the stories that I hear about how it's changed them as parents, how it's changed them as partners, how it's changed them as people who give a damn in the world. And it's almost like giving, I have never thought this before. As you know, you and I just said, let's meet and chat and see where it goes. So, but in a way, it's almost giving people permission to be vulnerable and name the things about them that they're not wholly okay with, and accept all parts of themselves. As you know, my original training was in psychodynamic psychotherapy, and a lot of it I dismissed and a lot of it I embraced. And the one thing that I embraced above all else from my psychodynamic work that I continue to hold really dear to me is the idea of whole object relations. It's not a good title because it doesn't give you a single clue what it's about, but whole object relations was a term that was coined by a therapist called Melanie Klein, who worked primarily with parents and children. And she discovered that at a certain point in a child's development, when they started to become more aware of their parents as separate beings from themselves, realized that the mummy or the daddy that they thought was all loving, all giving, all providing, and totally perfect, sometimes got cross with them, or sometimes was a bit absent or distracted. And that period in the child's growth, Melanie Klein called splitting. They couldn't hold that object of their parent as being both things. And so they had to say, well, that is that mummy and that's that mummy. And they're two different mummies. And only through life and growth and experiences do many of us, because not all of us ever get there, get to the point where we are able to see that, to have that whole object approach to arguments that we have with people, disappointments that we have. Going to see an author speak, which I have done a few times, an author I really highly regarded, and not finding them like the person that I thought they were on the pages. And the tendency to go, right, that's it, I'm never going to read another one of their books again, would be the childlike splitting defense. So nothing to do with writing, but it's to do with the writing that I do, and the coaching that I teach is all about that notion of acceptance, that we are all things. We can all be unkind and we can be kind and loving, and you take any quality, and there are two ends of that spectrum that we can all demonstrate in different circumstances. I wanted to, through my writing and through teaching coaching, make everyone aware of that, to be able to embrace all those aspects of themselves and indeed control them a bit better as well. But it makes for adult thinking in the world rather than child thinking in the world. And without getting too political, or we need more of it. We need more whole object thinking.
We need less absolutism, don't we? We need to know that everybody else is an imperfect being doing their best. And the way that you just described that, I don't know if I'm mixing terminology here, but individualization, when you realize that you are separate to your parents. I mean, that's sort of, it's the same idea, isn't it? Yeah. And you only do that when you abandon the perfect in that example, the idea that a being ever existed who was purely there to serve your needs, knew what they were, was in absolute rhythm with your thinking. And like you say, those child responses, like if there's an author that you really admire and you meet them and are in some way or level disappointed or maybe just blindsided slightly that they weren't what you expected, then that child response that you talked about, where you go, well, sod them, that they're not part of my brain and life anymore. Whereas instead, when you're able to embrace that everybody is separate to you, you can become almost closer to your version of the writing. You can be clearer about what came from you. And I think potentially celebrate that it's not about the person who wrote that book being this perfect being any more than your parent is a perfect being. And I'm wondering if that's maybe linked to how I don't know what your experience was, but approaching when you wrote any of the books that you've written, was sort of abandoning the perfect and knowing that we have the right to get our voice out there. Was that a sort of thought process you went through?
It's a really good question. I don't think I went through it in advance. I think I went through it once I'd started writing, and I have to acknowledge Jeff Watts, the co-author of my first book, The Coach's Casebook. I have to acknowledge Jeff in this conversation. There it is. There it is, The Coach's Casebook. And can I just tell you a story about this book? If you look at the names, you will notice that it is Jeff Watts and Kim Morgan, which is against all literary...
Which is not alphabetical.
It's not alphabetical. It's against all literary. And if Jeff listens to this, he won't mind me saying it. My people-pleasing trait got the better of me, or the worst of me. And Jeff wanted his name first. And I was like, oh, shucks, what does it matter, Jeff? But it's there, a permanent reminder of my people-pleasing, even on the front of that book.
I must ask you about that, because most, if not every, I rarely generalise, but every writer, I think, will have their own version of that going on, that I'd be so interested, just however, at whatever level you're okay for me to ask. That was a co-writer relationship. You're both bringing different things to it. I guess my main question is, how does that work? What was your how did you experience that? And I hope it's not gendered in terms of putting ourselves second, but I think there's a lot potentially going on there that a lot of people will find very relevant to their own journeys.
Yeah, so it was a very specific set of circumstances, which I'll share with you, but I don't think the circumstances really explain that. I think I would have rolled over and done it, whoever had said it to me, frankly, because I'm always, does it really matter? Yes, it does matter, actually. However, I'm over it. Jeff's fine. Jeff and I love each other very much. So people in my network know this, and you know this, but my daughter died very suddenly, very tragically, and I disappeared from the business for quite a long time after her death to just try to recover. And when I eventually came back to the business, so many wonderful barefoot trained coaches reached out to me to try to see if they could do anything to help me in any way at all, which was just beautiful and generous and embracing. And some of them had actually stepped in and kept the business running in my absence. They picked it up. There was a manual. They picked it up. They taught it, and they kept it going. Jeff was one of the many people who said, can I come to see you? And Jeff was the first ever agile Scrum coach to come on the Barefoot course. And that led to lots and lots of other agile Scrum coaches training as coaches with us. Jeff said, I sat on that Barefoot course and listened to you for all those days, and I heard several times you saying you wanted to write a book. And I said, did I? And he said, yeah, it just leaked out of you, throughout the course. And he said, I've written 4 or 5 books. His first book was called Scrum Mastery, and they were all written for Scrum Masters and Agile coaches. And he said, I really want to get into the coaching space as well as an author, as well as being in the Agile space. And how about we write a book together? And also he said, maybe in some small way it will kind of help you take your mind off your grief. So we did. We wrote the book together, and I think, I was just going to say possibly it was my deference to him in terms of him having already written 4 or 5 books and me never having written another one. But largely it was my just ridiculous people pleasing that made me put my name second.
I'm going to ask my selfish question, and then I'm going to ask my other writer's question. My selfish question, something that really stuck with me in that is, I do know people, and there's a member of my family that I'm thinking of in particular, if they're asked their opinion about something on which purely they have a choice, they will say, it doesn't matter. Not, it doesn't matter to me, or I don't mind, but it doesn't matter. They've jumped to the objectivity to say that out there in the neutral universe, this doesn't matter, rather than own their opinion. And I find it so painful to hear, and I'm afraid it is gendered. I have yet to find males in the same spheres dismissing the fundamental relevance of their own opinions and choices and so on like that. And I guess maybe this is related to my broader question, which is, how did given that there are some stuff going on there around people pleasing and potentially imposter syndrome, how did co-writing work for you? What did work for you? What was important to you in that? What was it like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it worked really well. Then. Whether I could co-write now in the same way, I don't know, but I was a novice, and Jeff had experience of writing books. He also, being a Scrum Master, he just mapped it all out for us on Gantt charts and timelines. So from the point of view of having someone holding me to account and giving me deadlines, it worked perfectly, because that isn't my strength at all. And Jeff was very respectful, not deferential, but highly respectful of the knowledge that I had about coaching, which he didn't to the same level. So he deferred to me on all sort of coaching matters. I think we started writing a book that wasn't anything like the book that we ended up writing. We started writing more of a how to coach book. And I had one of those, I think I do my best thinking when I'm asleep, because I remember just waking up one morning and it's almost like my brain has come up with a whole plan overnight. And I woke up this morning and I was like, no, we've got to just rip up that book and we've got to do something different. And the Irving Yalom thing was in my mind at that point. Let's do a series of case studies. And then it was potentially a difficult conversation to have with Jeff, because we were a long way through it. But he was like, fine, I believe in you, let's change it. And then we sort of divvied up the case studies, and we also added in the interviews with people, which I think they were great doing the interviews. It was lovely doing the interviews, and the people were so generous, successful people, really generous in sharing their experiences of that particular overdone trait that we were writing about. He held me to account. I had a flat in Streatham Hill in South London at that point, and I've got really happy memories. Jeff used to come to the flat and we'd write all day and go out for lunch together, and it was a really lovely, collaborative, generous experience between the two of us, two completely different people.
Would there be, at that point, just logistically, would you take different chapters, start, swap, add? How did it function?
I think we took separate chapters and then we kind of swapped them over, as you've indicated, and we kind of edited one another's. And then we had an editor. We self-published, but we spent a lot of money on it. We had some really good people around us. We had an editor. I wasn't wholly happy with the first edit, so my husband, who's not a writer but a brilliant literary
we have a swear box for not a writer.
No, he hasn't written any books, but he writes beautifully, and he sort of second edited.
And had some editing experience behind him, right?
Yes, not professionally, but yeah, he writes beautifully, succinctly, crisply. So he second edited it, and we were as happy as you can ever be, I think, at the end of the process. we had a wonderful book launch somewhere in, I can't remember where it was, Book on Wenley's kind of bar restaurant in London, in the city. And we had cocktails made in the name of every one of the traits. Perfectionism, going to excess.
Oh my God. Kim, that is also a book. That's a book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cocktails of Psychological Traits.
Yeah. The part, I mean, I have still somewhere, I've got the cocktail till receipt, which is about 10 feet long, because it was like all on us, and people were trying all of them. They had all 12. It was wonderful. And also at that party, just before the launch, I said, we need to do something with them. So I quickly invented the trait game, and we had some cards made up with all the traits on them, and that's become something we use in the business now. I don't know if you ever encountered it at Barefoot, but yeah, where you can sort of exaggerate your overdone trait and start to realise how ridiculous it is.
This is such a wonderful idea. I must talk about there's no must. I want to talk about the Coach's Survival Guide as well.
Yes.
How much time elapsed between one book and the next?
I don't know for sure. A couple of years, I think, probably. I think coaches, I don't know. I don't have the publication dates tattooed on me.
But in terms of you,
maybe years,
something has shifted, because it is you.
Yeah.
It is Kim Morgan.
Yes. Yes. So how did that come about? So first of all, I'm feeling really conscious that this is my specific story, but if it's useful to other people, I'm really helpful to share it if other people get some more confidence about writing. So my daughter was working for me then, and she was doing Barefoot's marketing, and she sent a copy of the Coach's Casebook to the Psychologies editor. And we didn't hear anything for ages, because I had no connection with Psychologies Magazine at the time. Then one day I got a phone call from this woman saying, oh my God, I've just read this book and it's fantastic. It's been sitting by my bed with all the other books that people send me. And I kind of picked it up, thought I'll go through it. And she said, could you do something like that for Psychologies Magazine, please? And, here I am nearly 10 years later, still doing that. Also, McGraw-Hill Open University Press read the book. One of the people there read the book, and they approached me and said, would you write for us? So they just approached me. So I didn't actually consider then contacting Jeff to write it with me, because I think that we did that one-off thing together, and there wasn't any real ever expectation on either side that we would do another one. So the Coach's Survival Guide came about because I was approached by a publisher.
And it just shows how important it is to swing to the next branch.
Yeah, exactly. That was a different experience altogether, because mainly the editing. I wanted to say this for other people who are going to write and particularly be published rather than self-published, because I had, until that point, I think I'd had very kind editing, very gentle editing, and the kind of professional editing I had from the publishing house at the time felt brutal. And I've had other people sort of share that story with me about their experiences. I do some editing now of people's books, and I always in advance tell them that they may feel like that. I always sort of set the scene for, what it is that I'm doing, and I'm coming from the best possible intentions and a good heart. But it can be like you've given your baby to somebody, and they go, oh my goodness, isn't it ugly? And aren't you dressing it terribly? And it's that personal. So I think it was my sort of hard lesson, actually. And I think after the first edit, I sort of curled up in a ball and couldn't write I just couldn't face it for a while. So it took me quite a long time to write it. And eventually I kind of hardened up. But what I would say to anyone who's going to be edited is, if the editors don't tell the process is going to be like, just be ready for it. Be ready for it to be difficult, because you've poured your heart and soul into these words.
How much did it feel in this particular example? How much was what they were saying and how much was how they were saying it?
Yeah, I think it was probably how. That's a good question.
It's an important, on a lot of levels, that is why we do the jobs we do. There's when a difficult change will genuinely help, but underneath that, do I share the objectives with the person who's telling me this will help? Have we been clear in terms of what in coaching would be contracting between the relevant people, in order that we are working towards a common objective? I guess one of the things that I didn't know when I was first edited was, newsflash, the other person is also a flawed human being. The defensive, both sides can come up. And I guess for me, the things that I hear a lot, and I don't know if this is what happened with you, and I'd love to know if it is, different things work for different people. So for example, I've got one friend who's a novelist, and she gets her feedback from her agent by email and does it all by email. And she prefers that to it being more conversational. Whereas I have somebody else who will have, who's actually also a novelist, and will have conversations with her agent that are conversations. And it's more of a holistic, it gives you that background. And I can completely see how for different people, both of those things might be infuriating or upsetting. That one will be going, just tell me what to do for God's sake. But the other will be going, be gentler, but be more conversational, or make it a dialogue, be more coach than lecturer in your editing. And I guess it's about, I know not everyone is in this situation, but if you are in a situation where you can really open a conversation with the person who's doing the editing, I guess for me it's about, don't be afraid to say what works for you. Maybe that if I went back to somebody, I'd know what had worked and not, or even where there would be no editorial second date.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think I was totally unprepared. They hadn't prepared me. I think it was fairly functional. There was no particular relationship in existence. It was fairly functional, and it was a shock to my system. And I think, given my relative kind of inexperience, the experience I had with Jeff was lovely. It was like the two of us just sort of playing, and then people around us in my life and in his life had sort of played a part in the marketing and the editing, and it was all very cozy. I was sort of thrust into a completely different environment. I think it was edited well. I think it was edited well, and I think it needed it, and I think I learned from it. But your point is, how it was done was something I was completely unprepared for. So much so, actually, that I had signed a deal for 2 books, and I, at the time, got out of the contract for the second book. But I think that was more about my vulnerability within this context of being a writer. I think it knocked me for 6, actually, at the time. Yeah. Now it would be a different story.
When it happens, it's such a beautiful thing when we see what we know needs to be in the world and we put it there. And I guess looking back at times when I have maybe not done something that I would like to have done, what coaching has made me able to recognise is that any of the energy that can go into, and I know you know this, that can go into beating ourselves up for not having been in the right space at the right time, that energy can be doing a lot more good going, what is the right space for me now or next? And creating the circumstances to make that happen, which is certainly what I'm making this year about for me. And I so hope is, I hope that whatever you want to be in the world, you will go and find the people that are right for you. Because it is like dating, isn't it? That you can see people go, right, I'm never doing it again because they've had a horrible time with somebody. And actually everybody's different. The right people are out there.
I love that dating analogy, Rachel. I love that dating analogy. I think, wouldn't it be fun if we set up a kind of website or platform of some kind, sort of based on the dating principle? Like, I'm a writer who, I'm looking for an editor who. Wouldn't that be good? Are you the man of my, or woman of my dreams?
Yeah. And really, what I hope people take from hearing this, or among the many things, is when we go out there looking for the right agents, looking for the right next step, the right indie publisher, if that's what you're doing, or agent who's going to get you to the big ones, whatever it happens to be, it is going in there with creative confidence, which is what, everything I do for writers and speakers and future writers and speakers is about, is what do I want to say? Who's going to help me say it? And it can be so difficult. And I just think our conversation is such a really important example of this, that if anybody from where I'm sitting has the right to say the things that they are saying, of course it's you. But for you on the inside of that, the feelings of I'm not a writer felt very, very real. And I so hope people listening to this will take that example that, it's what goes on inside us feels like logic, but actually, I'm always talking about how creativity and anxiety are using exactly the same software. It is storytelling. But I hope that, I hope that does make us realize we are good at storytelling. I realize time is getting on, but I must ask about Barefoot and the voice of that company, because that's another really wonderful use of storytelling that you're doing and that you've put in the world, which is about how that brand shows up and what the voice of that is. I'd love to ask you quickly if that's all right, just in terms of making that happen. What's that been like? Because that is very much creating, it is writing, it is putting something in the world.
Before I answer, could you just tell me what your experience of that Barefoot brand is? How do you receive the Barefoot story?
Yes, absolutely. When I first found out Barefoot existed, it was through Psychologies Magazine. So I already had the impression of, I'd seen the logo, I'd seen the name on with your articles. So I knew that was my first introduction. And then I saw there's a clarity to the sort of the colours, the green, and my favourite colours are green and purple, not necessarily relevant, but there was something very approachable, very accepting, it's sort of not pushy, just itself about the branding that I really liked. And as I read about the different open days that coaching companies were offering, I won't say who the other one was, but I went to theirs and I went to the Barefoot one. And the Barefoot one, and I just went, oh, this is wonderful, because it was a wonderfully gentle, isn't quite what I mean, but the way that it had read on the page and the way that I experienced it in the room was the clarity. Actually, yes, that. So I promise this actually does answer the question, but it's a really long answer to the question. There's a book I need to just hold up. So when I was doing my non-fiction book, one of the most important things, so this was Study and Revision Guide for GCSE Drama a few years ago.
Wow.
One of the most important things to me was these, which is
clarity.
Yeah. And so what we're doing here,
yes.
Yeah. Drama watch. Yeah. You can see drama watch words, and there's more, but you can see what's going on here. The most important thing was clarity. Yeah. And if you are clear about your objectives, about what you're there showing up for, everybody feels safer. And what the writing did already, but when I was in the room, what absolutely was underlined for me, it was just absolute clarity. It was, here's what the course is going to be about. Here's what this morning is going to be. Here are when the breaks are going to be, which I am a big, big fan of. It made you feel so safe we don't make ourselves feel, people don't make us feel it. I felt so safe in that room. I felt valued. The phrase, less at that morning, but as the course started, when they asked us to say what the feeling was, I said it was like throwing yourself at a crash mat. Not that I liked that in the real world in PE classes whatsoever. But in this, you could just go whack. You could just know that you were safe putting all of you onto that. And what I found about Barefoot is it is friendly, it is communication centric, and I felt recognised. I felt that there was a sense that you were very safe, that people that you could trust were in charge of it. But I felt celebrated as an individual. That was what I felt. And I felt like, yes, I want to go into the world and do that.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful to hear. Thank you.
I'll say the slightly bitchier side of this. I must say the bitchier side is that I went to another open morning where they did none of that. They just went, so what do you already know about coaching? And got us to do their work for about 10 minutes before they even said what to expect from the day. And I didn't even make it through the whole of the morning. This was on Zoom, so that was easier. But yeah, I went on my 2 initial dates and there was no question in my mind. It was you all the way.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think that's it, really. You know, we find one another, don't we? And I think that's our stance, actually. We believe wholeheartedly in what we do, and we try to model coaching in everything we do. And that means not pushing people and being honest and being congruent and creating the conditions to enable people to think for themselves, even in the taster sessions. We are obviously a commercial organisation, but it isn't bums on seats that drives us. It's people feeling like you did. It's people feeling like I've found a place where I think I'm going to learn comfortably and safely, and to then go out and use those skills in whatever area of my life I like to use them. And so it sounds a bit corny and a bit idealistic maybe, but you know, we live our values. We live coaching values. It would be crazy if we didn't. And I just quickly looked something up because I couldn't remember it word for word. But one of the other sort of my psychodynamic heroes is somebody called Winnicott, who was a pediatrician actually, but also a psychologist. And I often quote his description of a learning space as the optimal development atmosphere and vehicle for change in which meanings can be played with, considered and understood. And I like that played with idea. And I think we try to create that in the taster sessions. Actually, it's a potential space. So the taster sessions are just this potential space. It is an area of psychological experience located between wishes and reality, which I really like too, because you come to something hoping for something and maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And then it says, if carefully curated, it allows certainty about yourself and others to loosen. It allows for playful reflection, creation, and the opening up of new possibilities, eventually perhaps to enable shifts in self-identity. And that little paragraph from Winnicott sits at the heart of everything we do, really, from taster session to the course to working with organisation. We hope that what we provide enables people to go through a level of sort of transformation about themselves and their views of the world. And if we can't do it for them, somebody else probably can in a different way.
And it's being not married to the conclusion, being able to experience one step at a time, that I think has been so important. And from a writing perspective, that why creative confidence is at the heart of everything that we're doing here, that we're talking about. It's that you create reality, that we find who we are, what's going on in the page, what's going on in the world, through taking one step at a time, through finding out and expressing who we are. And I think that's why the coaching space is such a great space for everybody, but for writers particularly in this sense, because you are creating your world. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. And those lovely phrases of meanings can be played with, considered and understood. That's, I guess, what writers do, isn't it? And that psychological space located between wishes and reality maybe is something that sits at the heart of all the writing that we do as well.
That is such a beautiful thought to end on, but that doesn't mean we necessarily have to end on it. Is there anything you would like to explore, share, think aloud about to the writers out there and to everybody else who's passing?
Yeah, I don't think so, actually. The only thing I would like to say is thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for genuinely really making a difference to how I feel about being a writer. Genuinely, that's not bullshit. You really did in our last conversation, and you've built on it today. Thank you. And just for your warmth and curiosity and wisdom and playfulness, I think you're doing a wonderful job here, bringing writing and the possibility of writing to hopefully a lot of listeners. It's been really thought-provoking and really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim Morgan, for joining the Writers' Gym and for being such a muse for its creation in the first place.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.